Welcome back as we shift gears to Russia's invasion of Ukraine now, where 11 people have been injured after two Russian S-300 missiles struck a hotel in Kharkiv. Authorities said Turkish journalists were among those injured. Russia has stepped up airstrikes on Ukrainian cities in the past 2 weeks. Ukrainian officials say dozens of civilians have died in those attacks from drones and missiles. Kharkiv, just 30 kilometers from the Russian border, has suffered extensive damage from Russian airstrikes since President Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council has been reacting to Russia's barrage of missile attacks across Ukraine. In spite of Russia's relentless strikes, the Security Council also pointed out an act of goodwill that saw the exchange of more than 200 prisoners of war between Russia and Ukraine.
The country has been suffering some of the worst attacks since the beginning of the illegal war. Over the holiday period, Russian missiles and drones targeted numerous locations across the country. Amid the nearly unrelenting grim news from the war, one recent development stood out as positive. On 3 January, a long-awaited exchange of more than 200 prisoners of war on each side took place between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. This was the largest such exchange since February 2022. As the Secretary General noted, we commend the efforts of both parties and the third-party facilitation by the United Arab Emirates. While acknowledging this positive development, we remain gravely concerned about the situation of the remaining prisoners of war.
Since February 2022, more than 10,200, including 575 children, have been killed, and those injured over 19,300. Among them are nearly a dozen civilians killed in a series of strikes on Pokrovsk district in Donetsk region, among them 5 children. Across the country, attacks and extreme weather have left millions of people in a record 1,000 villages and towns without electricity or water since the beginning of this week, as temperatures dropped to below -15 degrees Celsius. Amid this turmoil, the people of Ukraine have continued to demonstrate extraordinary resilience. The emergency services, volunteers and family members work tirelessly to free people from under the rubble of damaged buildings or to recover the bodies of those killed, so they can receive the dignity of a funeral and proper interment. As reported by Russian Federation authorities and discussed in this council on 30 December last year, recent attacks on Belgorod Oblast, not far from the Ukrainian border, caused the death of at least 25 civilians in Russia, including 5 children, and injuries to over 100. The attacks also reportedly resulted in damage to civilian infrastructure, including a university building. Mr. President, members of the Council, let me reiterate that international humanitarian law must be strictly respected at all times.
The United States, along with France, Japan, Malta, the Republic of Korea, Slovenia, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom, issued a joint statement condemning the military cooperation that has now come to fruition between the DPRK and Russia. It's abhorrent that a permanent member of the UN Security Council is flagrantly violating Council resolutions to attack another UN member state, violations that further the suffering of the Ukrainian people, support Russia's brutal war, and undermine the global non-proliferation regime.
In the meantime, a vessel carrying a humanitarian shipment of 23,000 tons of fertilizers for Zimbabwe from the Russian company Oralchem has arrived at the port of Beira in Mozambique. The Russian ship carrying the shipment of fertilizers moored at the port of Beira. The shipment to Zimbabwe is the 4th delivery of fertilizers from Oralchem to Africa free of charge. The company has already sent more than 100,000 tons of fertilizers to the continent. In August 2023, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow scheduled the delivery of 25,000 to 50,000 tons of grain to 6 African countries free of charge during the BRICS Business Forum on the sidelines of the 15th summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. In November, a ship carrying 25,000 tons of grain from Russia arrived in Somalia's Mogadishu, being the first shipment of food aid that the Russian government had promised for the African continent. Paul Zakaria, Executive Director at Zimbabwe Farmers Union, explains the importance of the fertilizers delivery for his country.
Our own wheat, we do make bread, but it is the quality that we are after. So, of course, the wheat that comes from outside can be used to improve the quality of the bread and other confectionery products that we prepare out of the wheat that we have, plus the wheat that we receive from outside. So, coupled with that, it is also the issues to do with climate related challenges. This El Nino season might mean we do not have as much water readily available for irrigation, so that could lower our potential to produce as much as we did the last 2 seasons. So with that gesture, another 25,000 of the same grain coming into the country, it complements the resource that we have by way of strategic grain reserves, and then it pushes us even, into a better future while we prepare ourselves for the next wheat crop.